For most people today, the Israeli Palestinian conflict feels impossibly complex, an unending cycle of war, trauma, displacement, and political gridlock. It dominates headlines, divides communities, and evokes deep emotional responses. But to understand how we arrived here, we have to go back long before modern politics, before the rhetoric, before the talking points, to a century of events that shaped two national movements, two peoples, and one land. This is the real history of Israel and Palestine, told through verifiable facts, through empathy for both sides, and through the long chain of decisions, mistakes, and tragedies that led to the world we're living in today. Long before the modern conflict, the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea had been ruled by empires: Babylonian, Persian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic caliphates, Crusaders, Ottomans. It was home to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, each with deep historical roots. Jewish presence in the region goes back thousands of years, tied to biblical and historical kingdoms centered on Jerusalem. Palestinian Arabs, both Muslim and Christian, trace their ancestry through centuries of continuous residence, village life, agriculture, and urban culture under Islamic and Ottoman rule. When the Ottoman Empire collapsed after World War One, the future of this land fell into the hands of the British Empire, and this is where the modern story really begins. In 1916, Britain and France secretly negotiated the Sykes-Picot Agreement, carving the Middle East into artificial zones of control without consulting the people who lived there. These borders ignored ethnic, religious, and tribal realities in ways that still shape conflicts today. In 1917, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration, promising a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. The same British officials, often in the same meetings, promised Arab independence to leaders who had fought alongside them against the Ottomans. These contradictory promises laid the foundation for decades of tension. When Britain received the League of Nations mandate for Palestine in 1920, it inherited a land already home to hundreds of thousands of Arabs and a growing Jewish immigrant population fleeing anti Semitism and persecution in Europe. Jewish immigration accelerated in the 1930s as Nazism rose in Germany. For Jews facing extermination, Palestine represented hope, refuge, and return. For Palestinians, the rapid demographic change felt like dispossession. Clashes grew. British attempts to control unrest through curfews, armed policing, and collective punishments only deepened mistrust. By the end of the 1930s, Palestine was a society struggling with overlapping traumas: Jewish refugees escaping genocide, and Palestinian communities pushing against what they saw as colonial restructuring of their homeland. After World War II and the Holocaust, one of humanity's darkest chapters, in which 6 million Jews were murdered, the urgency for a Jewish state reached global recognition. Meanwhile, Palestinian Arabs demanded independence and the right to determine their own political future. In 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab, and place Jerusalem under international control. Jewish leaders accepted the plan reluctantly. Arab leaders rejected it, arguing that Palestinians, who made up about two-thirds of the population at the time, were being denied self-determination on their own land. When Israel declared independence in 1948, 5 Arab armies invaded, and the First Arab-Israeli War began. For Israelis, it was the War of Independence, a fight for survival. For Palestinians, it was the Nakba, the catastrophe during which more than 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled, and hundreds of villages were destroyed or depopulated. Both narratives are true to those who lived them. Both reflect genuine historical experiences of trauma, loss, and nation building under existential fear. After the war, no Palestinian state was created. The West Bank was annexed by Jordan, and Gaza was administered by Egypt. Hundreds of thousands of refugees lived in camps. The conflict had entered a new phase: frozen, unresolved, and simmering. In 1967, the Six-Day War reshaped the region again. Israel captured the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. For Israelis, it was a stunning military victory that ensured survival. For Palestinians, it meant military occupation, checkpoints, settlement expansion, and a future increasingly shaped by forces beyond their control. The seeds of today's tensions, from settlements to borders to sovereignty, were planted in these years. As Israel grew into a regional power, another part of its story gained global attention: the rise of its intelligence service, Mossad. Unlike conspiratorial portrayals, the real influence of Mossad comes from very public, high impact operations that shaped global perceptions, especially among Western political elites. In 1960, Mossad captured Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Holocaust in Argentina. His trial in Israel broadcast surviving Jewish trauma to the world, shaping moral sympathy and strengthening Israel's legitimacy. In 1976, Israeli commandos carried out the Entebbe raid, rescuing hostages in Uganda, an operation that stunned global audiences and elevated Israel's reputation for precision, resolve, and strategic capability. During the Cold War and the War on Terror, Mossad cooperated extensively with US and European intelligence agencies. These partnerships were mutually beneficial. Israel gained allies, Western governments gained access to intelligence on extremist networks, weapons trafficking, and hostile states. Over time, this cooperation created deep political bonds that explain part of why Western governments support Israel so consistently, not as a result of manipulation, but because of shared security interests and Israel's willingness to conduct operations that aligned with Western geopolitical goals. At the same time, Mossad's public image, fueled by books, films, espionage thrillers, and real life dramatic missions, helped shape a mythologized reputation. This reputation, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes earned, influenced public imagination in ways that added to Israel's strategic aura. This dual reality, tangible intelligence cooperation and cultural myth-making, helps explain why political elites often view Israel through a security lens that differs from the moral or humanitarian lens many ordinary people apply. Meanwhile, Palestinian political life was unfolding along its own difficult path. The Palestine Liberation Organization was formed in 1964, evolving toward a national independence movement. Israel and the PLO clashed repeatedly. In 1987, the First Intifada erupted, a grassroots uprising marked by mass protests, civil disobedience, and tragic casualties on both sides. The world watched images of young Palestinians confronting heavily armed soldiers, scenes that transformed global perception and intensified calls for a negotiated peace. This led to the Oslo Accords in the 1990s, when Israeli and Palestinian leaders shook hands on the White House lawn, promising a roadmap to two states. Many believed peace was possible. Many still believed the two peoples could share the land. But assassinations, mistrust, continued settlement expansion, corruption, political fragmentation, and extremism on both sides undermined the process. The Second Intifada in 2000 shattered what hope remained. In Gaza, Hamas rose to power after winning elections in 2006 and seizing full control in 2007. Gaza became isolated, blockaded, and repeatedly devastated by wars between Hamas and Israel. Civilian suffering mounted, Israeli families living under rocket fire, Palestinian families living under blockade, poverty, and bombardment. Then came October 7th, 2023, a day that deeply traumatized Israelis and Jewish communities worldwide. Hamas militants breached Israel's borders, killing more than 1,000 people, including civilians, families at a music festival, and entire communities in kibbutzim. Hostages were taken. It was the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. The horror of that day reshaped global Jewish fear and identity in ways that will echo for generations. Israel's military response in Gaza produced staggering Palestinian casualties, destroyed neighborhoods, displaced families, and deepened trauma across the Palestinian population. Many Palestinians felt they were reliving the Nakba, losing homes, loved ones, and any sense of safety. The humanitarian crisis intensified global outrage, despair, and polarization. In this moment, it became clearer than ever that both peoples carry legitimate, profound suffering, and that each side sees its pain reflected in every new tragedy. As the world debates, protests, and divides itself over the conflict, it is essential to remember the human beings beneath the politics. Israelis living with generational trauma from persecution, genocide, rockets, and terrorism. Palestinians living with generational trauma from displacement, occupation, siege, and statelessness. Two peoples whose lives have been shaped by forces far larger than themselves: colonial borders, global wars, political failures, and the consequences of decisions made long before they were born. There is no need to take sides to see suffering. There is no contradiction in recognizing both traumas as real. History demands that we acknowledge both narratives, not to equate them, but to understand them. And when we step back, what do we see? We see that British colonial decisions created frameworks doomed to conflict. We see that the Holocaust reshaped global morality and led to an urgent push for a Jewish homeland. We see that Palestinian displacement became one of the central tragedies of the modern Middle East. We see that wars, uprisings, diplomacy, and intelligence operations shaped global perceptions. We see that each attempt to solve the conflict created new realities, new grievances, and new wounds. This conflict is not ancient, it is not eternal. It was built, one decision, one trauma, one border, one war at a time. And because it was built, it can be understood. Understanding history is not the same as choosing a side. It is the beginning of seeing the people behind the headlines. The Israelis terrified on October 7th, the Palestinian families running from bombardment, the grandparents who remember 1948, the children who have known nothing but conflict, the millions in the diaspora, Jewish and Palestinian alike, carrying the weight of stories they did not choose. The real origins of Israel and Palestine are the origins of human tragedy and human hope, intertwined, inseparable, and still unfolding. If you found this exploration helpful, subscribe to The Real History 101. The more we understand history, the fewer people we dehumanize. And in conflicts like this, remembering the humanity on both sides might be the most important lesson of all.